Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this series today. Today, we're going to hear a little bit from Dan Shaw on his book, Traumatic Narcissism, Relational Systems of Subjugation. This book came out in 2013. Joseph Szimhart will be interviewing Dan today. He's been interviewing many authors as part of this Meet the Author series for ICSA. So with that being said, I'm really excited to learn from you today, Dan, and learn more about your book and what encouraged you to write it. And so Joe, feel free to go ahead and kick it off and start the conversation with Dan. I look forward to learning today from the both of you.
Thanks, Ash.
Okay, thank you, Ashlyn. Appreciate it, and good to see you again, Dan.
Nice to
as
see
always.
you, Joe.
Now, we're going to be talking about your book on traumatic narcissism and how you came about to write that. Now, we have a little bit of history together. We met when I was on an intervention case in Pittsburgh, I believe, and that was in the 1980s, the late 80s, I think.
That's right, yeah.
And
Well,
you had an experience
no, it would have been the early 90s, Joe.
the early 90s, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's been some time.
Yeah.
So, but that now you had an experience with a group headed by Guru Chidvilasananda back in the day, Siddha Yoga. Now, how much did that experience inform what happened in terms of you exploring this whole concept that you wrote for this book?
Right. Well, it certainly began with that experience because right after I left Siddha Yoga, I started my graduate degree in social work, and my final paper was entitled Traumatic Abuse in Cults. It's a paper, by the way, that ICSA published. And that paper was about what I was trying to put together and understand about my experience in Siddha Yoga. And I was trying to generalize it to an understanding of cult leaders in general. My focus was on the psychology of the cult leader, which I felt was sort of an underdeveloped area in the cult literature because, and I also felt like as a therapy patient, you know, the emphasis in therapy would often be on what made you vulnerable to getting into a cult, what was your prior pathology that got you into the cult, those kinds of issues. And my feeling was that it wasn't hard at all to figure out, you know, my prior issues that made me vulnerable to cult participation. But what I thought was really mind-boggling was how cult leaders thought and behaved and how to explain their psychology. So that was my interest right from the get-go, and that's when I began to really look into narcissism. So 20 years later, when I wrote the book, almost 20 years later, as I was writing that book, you know, my original ideas were kind of the nucleus of what I then wanted to expand to include all kinds of relationships, not just cult relationships.
Okay, yeah, wonderful. I had a question regarding that. You know, as I see cults now, I see them under the umbrella of a hero system. You know, there's kind of this hero, you could call it the narcissistic leader, but there's a feedback loop. It's a systematic feedback loop, and sometimes the leader's narcissism increases because of the devotion of the devotees.
Right.
In a sense, the cult wants its hero to be the greatest hero because that makes the follower greater.
Yes.
If their hero is greater, and how does that fit into what you've done in your research?
Well, what you said is accurate, and I agree. I probably come at it from a slightly different angle. So what I believe is that the cult leader has developed a delusion about their own omnipotence. So the cult leader might be a manipulative con artist, but I believe most of them are simultaneously holding a delusion about their own omnipotence. and they require that followers support and reinforce and maintain their delusion. So the followers have to be seduced into the cult leaders, into a relationship with the cult leader. And then they have to be controlled by the cult leader in order for him to continually be able to extract out of them what he needs, which is reinforcement and support of his delusion of omnipotence, right? So the cult lead and the cult follower becomes 100% dedicated to proving to the leader that the leader is this hero, as you're describing him. And the leader is completely dependent on the followers providing that feedback. So it is exactly as you say, a feedback loop.
And in your study, of course, you look at the traumatizing aspect of it, where subjugation becomes harmful.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's a certain amount of subjugation, for instance, in militaries and
Yes.
that kind of a arrangement, but it's a pretty open system in terms of what it is and why it's there, and it's easy enough to describe. But when it comes to this kind of thing with a subjugating narcissist, it's a lot more subtle. So there's I guess a staged idea of what's going on, and then there's a backstage thing, something that's going on behind the scenes. I'm not explaining it very well, but I'm curious to hear how you would look at that, and
Right.
how the narcissist gets people to do things that they normally wouldn't do.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Great question. And there is there is a public face and a private face within these groups. Anybody who's been on the inside knows that when you're close to the guru in the inner circles or the leader, you're seeing a level of cruelty and sadism that the greater public, if the leader has a greater public, they don't see. They see the benign face of the leader. Yeah, the subjugation is necessary. The leader depends on being able to control followers in order to extract what he needs from them. He's dependent on what they're going to give. And he has to exploit everything they've got, their talents, their intelligence, their creativity. He has to take it out of them and claim it for himself.
Mm-hmm.
And
but also, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
But I just wondered if you could talk about this, because somehow these characters, they're very clever, and they get people that, they discard people that don't buy into the narcissism right away. They're unenlightened, they're ignorant, get them out of here.
Right.
But the people that do buy into it, into the charisma, there's a certain level of manipulation that goes on, and it's sort of a reversal of the idea of punishment, that punishment is for your own good.
Right.
And the devotee accepts it. So how does that work? Explain that.
Well, it's a complex phenomenon, as you well know, because you've studied it yourself for so many years. But the way I see it is that the leader seduces initially, and once that seduction has succeeded, the next stage of maintaining the dependence of the follower, because the seduction is aimed at making the follower dependent, making the follower completely enamored and infatuated with the leader, and therefore wanting to give everything they've got. But they need to be made to feel as though they can't live without the leader. They need to be made to feel that everything they were before the leader was just garbage and trash, and that only with the leader do they have any hope of redeeming themselves or of fulfilling themselves, right? So the way that once the leader has succeeded with the seduction, what follows is the three behaviors of intimidation, belittling, and humiliation. And those are the three that you see in every cult with every cult leader. They are intimidating, so you are looking up to them, trembling in fear, hoping always that you won't be banished. They are belittling. They need you to know that you are desperately in need of them because of how small you are, or how weak or unworthy. And the humiliation. They need to be able to humiliate you in front of everyone. Putting somebody on the hot seat is a good example. And that public humiliation and shaming is followed by confession and further and deeper submission. So it becomes a model to all the followers: submit more deeply. And if you are put on the hot seat, submit even more deeply, right? So the leader is maintaining his supply, his narcissistic supply. The followers are just that for him, narcissistic supply. And he has to maintain their dependency. And he does it through the intimidating, belittling, and shaming.
Okay.
That kind of get to what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. I had a question, and people often wonder about what is the difference between antisocial personality and malignant narcissism, or do they blend at times, and you have a little bit of both in some of the types of people that you're describing in your book?
Yeah, I think they often blend. But what I wanted to try to focus in on and isolate in the traumatic narcissism idea was that it's this system of subjugation, so that leader, in order to be, to put it simply, the leader must maintain his delusion of bigness, but he must do it by inducing in his followers the belief in their own smallness. If they believe in their smallness, they look to the leader for to verify their own validity. They're so small and they're so nothing, but they matter because the guru is their leader. So it's this paradox for the follower. I'm nothing, I'm nobody, but actually I'm one of the most intelligent and special people in the world because I follow you. And but in the guru or cult leader follower scenario, that has to be split up. The leader has to be the one who's most special and most powerful and big, and the follower has to be the one who's small and humble and meek and dependent.
Okay. I'd like to ask you this question too, moving into politics a little bit, and I know you enjoy politics.
You know me.
You can't stop. We can't stop. But I read a book about narcissism in politics, and I forget the title now, but the concept in it talks about the wounded narcissist, meaning the average person that feels that things outside of himself in the environment are taking away his livelihood, his self-esteem, and all of that. It could be immigrants, it could be the government, it could be whatever, alien implants, I don't know. But something outside of the self is wounding their narcissism. We all have some narcissism.
Right.
But so the wounded narcissist will pick a hero or a cult leader, if you will, that tells them that indeed these other things are taking away your good, your welfare, your self-esteem. You have these things to blame. Come to me. I have the answers to this. We're going to stop those people from coming here and taking your job. We're going to do all that. So
yeah,
how does that work? That idea that the someone with grandiose narcissistic traits can tap into someone that already believes that others are hurting their ability to thrive.
Right.
So in other words, there's a market out there, is what I'm saying, for a narcissist.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, every cult I'm sure you will agree, has to define an evil enemy, and by maintaining your affiliation in the cult, you are being protected from the evil enemy. You're also possibly called upon to battle the evil enemy if the cult leader wants you to do that. In Siddha Yoga, followers were called upon to battle her brother, Guru Maya's brother,
Right.
Swami Nityananda, who was made the evil enemy. And he was harassed and stalked for many, many years by followers of Guru Maya at her direction. So every cult has this, and it's similar in politics. If there's enough people who can be persuaded that their difficulties in life are being caused by an evil enemy, let's say it's immigrants, let's say it's liberals, let's say it's Democrats, or it's who are some of the other evil enemies? Feminists, and people of color, people who promote Black Lives Matter. If all of those groups are evil enemies, then you look to a leader who is ready to fight those evil enemies on your behalf, and who will encourage you to fight them. And that's going to be how you feel as though you're being heard and recognized and protected.
Okay.
It's a reinforcement of the cult. When the cult leader identifies evil enemies, everybody bands together. Now we have a cause, now we have a mission, and it binds the cult in closer connection.
Yeah, and another question before I ask you to read something. In recovering from being damaged by a traumatizing narcissist, I mean, it depends on the individual's person's makeup, because some people just walk away from that and kind of get along okay and re-socialize.
Yeah.
But others have a hard time. So how do you help someone that's having a hard time recovering from that and gaining their own self-esteem back again?
Right. Well, I work with a lot of people who weren't in cults, but who grew up in families where they were traumatized by a very narcissistic parent. And, when you're working with cult survivors, there's a lot of psychoeducation that goes on about cults. You're not just, you're certainly doing all the therapeutic things you normally do and help people, understand and make sense of and feel their own feelings and grieve and so on and mourn, so you're certainly doing that with these people recovering from cults, along with the education. But really, it's a process, it's a project of discovering a me, a sense of self that belongs to you. The narcissist has persuaded you that yourself, your subjectivity is of no value, because that narcissist needs you to be an extension of him or her. The narcissist, if you have your own subjectivity, your own independence, the narcissist can't control you and exploit you. So the recovery is really about recovering a strongly felt sense of self that you have faith in and you trust and believe in. And that's the process. How do we do that? Well, we just keep talking as a therapist. We keep talking and looking and seeing and trying to fit the pieces together and make sense of it.
Okay. So it takes time, and of course, everybody recovers at their own rate. I understand.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. And there are people who are shattered and for many years, perhaps, can struggle to believe in themselves again. As we know, many people go to other cults or back to their cult. And then there are people that just are ready to get up and fight. Certainly we saw with NXIVM that a lot of people who left immediately got into battle, and they
Yeah.
succeeded. But
Yeah.
I think many of them are now finally, with their leader in jail, are finally actually going through that process of coming to grips with the loss and with the recovery of the self, the faith in the
And
self.
beginning to recognize the wounds, that
Right,
go pretty
right.
deep in many cases. So Dan, let's get to a reading. You
Sure.
picked something out, so
Yeah.
let's hear
Here's
it.
the book, Traumatic
Wonderful.
Narcissism. It's an academic publisher, so unfortunately it's a little costly, but it is on Amazon and on the Routledge website as well. Okay, I thought I'd read just 6 points about cults that just about apply to every cult. Everybody knows Robert J. Lifton's points. These are a bit of an elaboration. So I won't read every word, but I'll get to the point here. So the following are some of the most common dynamics we see in cults. 1, purification of ego. The followers' deficiencies are grouped under the umbrella of the ego, the monkey mind, or a similar idea using different words, which is regarded as a harmful appendage or blockage of the true self and must therefore be purified by the leader for the followers to reach her potential. Purification in the case of cults typically means being subjected to various forms of sadistic belittling and humiliation, including in some cases accepting beatings. Purity may also be judged by one's willingness to give over most or any money one might have, and willingness to be subjected to sexual abuse. I'll go on to the second. Only perfection is good enough. One's potential is defined as any way the leader chooses, but in one form or another, cult leaders are always demanding perfection in the form of devotion, loyalty, willingness to obey, and willingness and ability to recruit others. By demanding perfection, the leader makes it impossible for the follower to fully succeed at anything, including devotion. And therefore, it's impossible for the follower to avoid the leader's abuse of criticism. The third point, incessant urgency. The more successful and powerful a particular cult becomes, the greater the risk of public exposure, and therefore the more urgent and hysterical the culture becomes. The leadership of the group becomes more shameless and without boundaries, demanding more and more time, money, and energy of the followers, defining enemies of the group to eventually include anyone not in the group, and becoming increasingly punitive of deviance within the ranks. 3 more points. The fourth is violation of boundaries as a norm. As followers discover that no effort they make is ever good enough to earn the leader's full recognition or to make them exempt from the leader's destructive attacks, they become more and more desperate to please the leader, becoming willing to let down their own boundaries and to violate the boundaries of others at the leader's behest. We certainly saw that in NXIVM. 5, inner deviance must be eradicated. Ultimately, followers act on the belief that only the leader's thoughts and feelings matter and have validity, and the follower must exist only to serve the leader's aims. The follower actively seeks to negate any aspect of his own subjectivity that the leader might disapprove of. And finally, defend the leader no matter what. To most outside observers, the leader's aims are clearly nothing more than self-aggrandizement. Insiders, however, in spite of little or no evidence on which to base their assertions, cling stubbornly to the belief that the leader is actually pursuing lofty and noble aims. Asked to do anything to enrich the leader, including in the case of some notorious groups prostituting themselves, followers obey and find a way to believe that whatever they do is righteous. By remaining loyal to the leader, the followers persuade themselves that their own existence is given meaning and validity by their support of the leader's mission. So that's a little piece of the
Wow.
chapter on cults. I should say that other chapters, yeah, thank you, Joe. I should just say other chapters have to do with being raised in a family with narcissistic parents, or being in a relationship or marriage with a narcissistic partner. Even a chapter on training in mental health fields, where training programs or supervisors can exercise narcissistic kinds of subjugating behaviors. And I get into politics a bit. And I also talk about more for the mental health professional, what are some of the real therapeutic challenges and how do we address them?
Okay, great. Do you apply some kind of an instrument, a questionnaire, to determine the level of narcissism or the quality of it that someone might be exhibiting?
You know, I don't do that, and mainly because I never trained to use psychological tests, and but I have worked on some occasions with people who were traumatizing narcissists. See, most of the people who come to therapy are the victims of that kind of person, but every now and then somebody comes who is pretty much victimizing others. It's not always easy to work with that kind of person, and I find that empathetic, compassionate, but very forthright, direct approach is what seems to work. And if a highly narcissistic person actually is capable of and wants to be able to change, you have a shot as a therapist. Very often, such people will just come to therapy to get you to prove that the other person in their life is wrong and bad. And if you don't agree, they'll leave. Yeah. So, that's kind of my litmus test. How narcissistic are you? Are you willing to stay and look at yourself, or are you absolutely not willing to look at yourself and never admit any wrong? And that right away pretty much tells you you've got a heavy armor of narcissism and to get through.
Okay. All right, great. I think we're running low on time. I'm not sure where we are here, but thanks a lot. And by the way, you're looking great. I know you went through a lot of physical stuff lately, healing. How you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I had finally 2 knees replaced and a lower back that's all shored up. And I'm getting out and walking around and hiking and having a great time for the first time in a long time. So it's great. Thank you, Jeff.
Excellent. All right. Good to see you again, Jan. Hi.
Good to see you. Thank you.